Wow. Ben Shapiro, who is probably leading the charge of like the online cohort of conservative influencers and commentators in like criticizing Trump publicly. He's just edging towards that every day. He's clearly incredibly disappointed about the results from the midterm elections, and he says, "quote Heads should roll. Republican leadership needs to be held accountable for what happened in the midterm elections."
This was not only not a red wave, it was not a red tide, it was barely a red trickle. Barely a red trickle, which means heads should roll. When your football team is expected to go 16-0, it's one thing if your football team then proceeds to go 14-2 or 10-6. If your football team proceeds to go 8-8, people get fired. The entire coaching staff, the entire leadership team in the Republican Party needs to go, and it needs to go now.
All right, pause it for a second. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to be a jerk, but he's like been posting all the time about like going to the gym, and he's trying to grow a beard, and now he's coming out with football analogies where it's like, dude, I know that you don't care about that kind of stuff. But anyway, it's just a little bit of an aside. I love when he tries to beef himself up as the tough guy. It's just, that's why he went to Home Depot and he bought that plank of wood. He's an everyman. All right, keep going.
He should have had that plank of wood like mounted in the background.
I mean, honestly.
I guess that'd be like a shelf,
back in 2021. And I said to them, if somehow you fail to take the House, given the conditions that you have been given, every one of you ought to lose your jobs. Well, they're barely going to take the House. And I mean barely going to take the House. The current estimate suggests that Republicans are going to win somewhere between 8 and 15 seats in the House. They started off with 212. That means they will end up on the low end at 220 out of 435, which means that they would have a 5-seat majority in the House after starting with just a 10-seat minority in the House. That is an extraordinarily crappy result. In the Senate, the Republicans look like they are going to be on the losing edge of this one. Basically, the entire Senate comes down right now to Georgia, where it looks like there will be a runoff between Herschel Walker and Raphael Warnock. Arizona, not all the votes are in because apparently all the votes in Arizona are counted by a single blind nun working in Mozambique. And so we have to take at least 7 years to count all the votes in
pause
Arizona.
It for a sec.
And the same thing holds true.
I'm sorry. There are Republicans out there who are saying that we shouldn't even be counting the votes electronically. And I believe that one of those ideas was coming out of Arizona, that it should be done by hand counting, which would make the whole like blind nun thing, it would be even less than that. I mean, much more delayed than what he's actually proposing. But that's it shocks me that they are upset about the how quickly or how slow the votes are being counted when everything that they're proposing is going to slow down that process. But and even in Pennsylvania Republicans made sure that mail-in ballots and absentees could not be counted until the day of. So they deliberately tried to slow the process and then get pissy about the process being slow. Keep on.
Arizona, not all the votes are in because apparently all the votes in Arizona are counted by a single blind nun working in Mozambique. And so we have to take at least 7 years to count all the votes in Arizona. And the same thing holds true in Nevada. If you have to ballpark the outcomes of those races right now, what you would figure is that Republicans, in order to gain control of the Senate, would need to take 2 out of those 3. Republicans, I think, may still take Nevada. It looks as though they're going to lose Arizona. And that runoff with Herschel, we're going to get another Senate runoff in Georgia, this time featuring the extraordinarily flawed candidacy of Herschel Walker against Raphael Warnock in an off-year election where Brian Kemp is not on the ballot to drag Herschel Walker up ballot. These are crap results, guys. These are bad results. I'm not going to sugarcoat stuff. I'm not going to pretend that this is a wonderful evening for Republicans or even that it's a good evening for Republicans. It was a garbage evening for Republicans last night.
Ha ha, ha ha. All right, well, there you have it. Cope.
Yeah, I mean, it's your party, dude. Like, it's the people who you support, and they lost because their ideas are bad, and and some of them are also uncharismatic. It just is what it is. Get better politics. Don't be mad that people don't like them.
Yeah, you guys regularly have senators and shit on your show, and you're like to complain about like we didn't have a coherent message like Matt Walsh did. It's like, you guys have been talking about critical race theory and trans people for like a year now.
Yeah.
That's like surprise.
Yeah.
Literally wall to wall coverage. No, and frankly, it's wall to wall coverage that is often treated completely earnestly and uncritically by media that would benefit from treating it with a more critical eye. And yeah, but the people just didn't like what they heard. Frankly, imagine how bad it would have been if this country wasn't so gerrymandered. It would have been a real bloodbath on the Republican side.
100%. And specifically in Michigan, where they really overcame a lot of gerrymandered maps for some of the best successes that the Democratic Party has seen in that state in recent years. Brendan from Kentucky writes in as well, man of the people, Shapiro doesn't even know that the NFL plays 17 games a season now. So just another petty point that he's still in the 16-game mindset. But he's right about that it was a bad night. He's right that it was a bad night. And it's fun to see him angry about it.
It feels like a lot of their like predictions and projections must have been more vibes felt from 2010, like what happened in Obama's first presidency term and the midterms and the sort of Tea Party wave that took over the Republican Party and then kind of took over our country for a little bit. But times have changed. The Republican Party's base, that Tea Party wave that comes in, is still coming in from the right, and they're just getting more and more, I don't know, fringe, and therefore alienating more of America. So that's just the Republican Party having their own internal schism where they're being dragged by the right by their worst elements, and their worst social elements, I should say. But certainly, they shouldn't get a pass for only wanting to be like their worst economic selves.
Well, and in 2010, it was just a very different atmosphere where the Tea Party was able to like brand themselves uncritically as fiscal conservatives that were putting the brakes on the out-of-control spending by the black guy. And isn't it scary that things are changing? There's a black guy in office now.
And Obamacare.
Yeah, right. Ooh, what is that? And
death panels.
As Jesse Waters said, we played this clip earlier in the show before you guys joined. He said that, people just don't hate Joe Biden in the same way that they hated Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama. And the Hillary thing is Fox News and other right-wing outlets built up propaganda against them. Much of it was gifted to them as well, but for years and years and years, decades against the Clintons. And so it was much easier to reactivate that quite quickly when a woman also was running for office in 2016. And so, I think a lot of the media focus was on Biden's relative unpopularity, maybe not motivating Democrats. But really the story is also that he might be unpopular with polling, but it's not like he's personally creating some sort of animus down ballot against him.
Right.
And
I don't
that
think
might
anyone...
be the story. I mean, people do hate him. I mean, when I was on Left Reckoning last night, and I kind of made this point, and Griscom was like, drive around Texas and you'll see people hate Joe Biden. I understand that. But it's just a different flavor of it and a different level than what we saw with a black president and with a female
those people will hate
candidate.
any Democrat.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah,
It's
people
interesting
hate Joe
that
Biden.
They tried the whole anti-Joe Biden campaigning all throughout in the lead up to 2020. They did the whole, and they ran on the right. They ran with him being like demented and he's losing his mind and he's not all there and he's, calling the R word and all that stuff. And that proved to be an absolute failure of a strategy. And then what do? They go, you know what? We're going to take that same strategy and we're going to use it for John Fetterman. And look what happened. They lost again.
Yeah. And also Hunter Biden, right? And which is something you can kind of extrapolate to the Fetterman race, which they were blaming Fetterman essentially for his medical condition and hoping that would win the day. But you could see it in the same way that they were trying to create Hunter Biden as a proxy for his father. Because wow, this son of a president has gone through a ton of trauma, a car accident where his mother and sister died and then fell into addiction when his brother died and everything. And like, I understand maybe it's not cool or fun to have empathy for Hunter Biden, but I do. I mean, it seems like he's gone through a lot of crap, and all they can dig up on him when parsing through his laptop are voicemails from Joe Biden saying, "I love you. I'm going to do whatever I can to make sure you get better." And it's like, got him, go. It's just that does not sway people because so many people have people in their lives who have dealt with addiction and understand that that's not a moral failing. It's just crazy that Republicans are, that you hear them talk about like the opioid crisis and fentanyl coming over our borders, and then part of their tactics of a smear campaign against Biden, or like a way to demonize him, was blaming him for his son's addiction.
Yeah, they live. This is the thing though. They live in their own little cutoff bubbles, and they're so deep inside of them. They really are so out of touch. They have no idea how the rest of the country, the rest of the world looks at normal everyday things, and what they deal with in their normal everyday lives. They are so out of touch.